There's a Buddhist psychologist teacher named Jack Kornfield who tells this story. So, it's the story of a young man who was in the military who had a problem with his anger. His superiors referred him to an 8-week mindfulness meditation course, which they offer in some parts of the military and some parts of the government as well. Around week 6 of the course, he was out grocery shopping. It was the end of the day. The grocery store was crowded. The checkout lines were long. He noticed there was a woman, a couple of people ahead of him, who was in the wrong line. She only had a couple of items, and she was not in the line for 8 or less. And, you know, he was a military man, so he had some military training, and he just thought this was not right. She should be in the other line. So as he's standing there, starting to feel the feelings about this, he notices that once she gets to the cashier, she has a baby in her arms, and she hands the baby to the cashier. They start to ooh and on, you know, taking the baby in and having their conversation. So he's getting really, his blood pressure is rising, he's getting really worked up. And then he says, okay, I'm taking this mindfulness class, I'm going to use some of these principles. So he takes a deep breath, he feels his body, he breathes, he starts to feel himself kind of come down a little. And by the time he gets to the cashier, he's really in a pretty good space. So he says to the cashier, that was a pretty cute kid. And she said, oh, did you think so? Thank you. That's my son. She said, his father, my husband, was in the military like you, and he was killed in Afghanistan. And this is my mother who watches him now because I have to work full time. And she tries to bring him in when she can so I can see him when I'm working.
Thank you, that was beautiful. Maybe you've had this experience. You are in the line at the grocery store, or you are picking your child or grandchild up at school, or you are at a committee meeting and someone does something or says something that gets under your skin. And you fixate on it, am I right? How could they be so selfish, self-centered, oblivious, callous? Fill in the blank. You can't get over it. It follows you home. It colors your interactions with your family, your friends, for the rest of the day. Or maybe this. You are in line at the grocery store, or picking your child up at school, or you are at a committee meeting, and you yourself say or do something that you later regret. And you wish you hadn't said or done it, and you fixate on it. Am I right? How could I have been so selfish, self-centered, oblivious, callous? Fill in the blank. You can't get over it. It follows you home. It makes itself a little cushion on your pillow that night. And just as you drift off to sleep, it taps you on the shoulder. Remember me? Remember that thing you said? Hi, I'm still here. There's a word for this compulsive tendency to overthink, to rehash, to cycle back to the same thought over and over again. It's called rumination. To ruminate means to chew over. It has the same root as the word ruminants, the category of animals that have 4 stomachs. Ruminants, like cows, sheep, goats, and camels. Their digestive system works differently than ours. They chew, swallow, regurgitate, then chew again. They ruminate. This works well for cows. But what humans chew over is our distressing thoughts. Ruminating for humans means to brood over upsetting thoughts by replaying them again and again in our mind. In a recent BuzzFeed article called "How to Stop Overthinking Everything," psychologist Ryan Howes writes, "As a psychologist who has dealt with overthinking on both a personal and professional level, I can definitely confirm it sucks." That's a very technical psychology term, by the way. We all do it, he says, and most of the time it's relatively harmless. We churn over what we should have said or overplan what we should do next, and then we move on. It's annoying, but most of the time it's no more stressful than an earworm song that you can't get out of your head or a nagging discussion you wish you could redo. But sometimes it's worse than that. Ruminating steals time and energy and rarely produces anything worthwhile. By exhausting you in the process, it makes you more susceptible to its close relatives, anxiety and depression. While rumination isn't its own diagnosis, Howes says, it is unique in that it can be a symptom of both depression and anxiety. The depressed person dwells on losses and missteps from the past, while the anxious ruminator drowns in a sea of what-if questions, forever envisioning the negative outcome. Whether it's what we can't change or can't predict, sometimes our brains get stuck trying to control the uncontrollable. Now, rumination is funny because it doesn't work the same for our good thoughts or memories or predictions. Those come into our mind for a moment and then fade away. It's the negative thoughts that seem to regurgitate. And rumination is not a problem-solving process. It's not like when we're thinking through a problem to find a possible solution. Rumination for people rarely ends with helpful digestion. The thoughts recycle and repeat without resolution. So to stop the cycle, we have to interrupt it rather than let it take its course. And it's really important that we find some tools for ourselves that work to interrupt our rumination. Dr. Guy Winch tells us why. He is a psychologist and author of Emotional First Aid: Healing Rejection, Guilt, Failure, and Other Everyday Hurts. Replaying distressing thoughts, Winch says, is like picking at emotional scabs because it brings up the distress each time we have the thought and floods our body with stress hormones as a result. We can easily spend hours and days stewing in upsetting thoughts, and by doing so, putting ourselves in a state of physical stress and emotional distress. As a result, habitual rumination significantly increases our risk of developing clinical depression, impaired problem solving, eating disorders, substance abuse, and even cardiovascular disease. So we know it's bad for us. We know we all do it. So how do we stop it? How do we interrupt this cycle? The first step is awareness, noticing, realizing that we have picked up a thought and haven't been able to put it down. Noticing is its own form of interruption. Another really powerful tool is replacement. Replacing the recurring thought with either a question or a statement that might be more helpful. So if your recurring thought is, "Nobody likes me," you can interrupt that thought with the question, "How can I begin to build some new friendships?" Or if your recurring thought is, "I'm not good enough," you can try interrupting that thought with a little mantra, like, "I am doing my best with who I am today." Or borrow the words from our first principle of Unitarian Universalism, "I have inherent worth and dignity." Sometimes these mantras feel a little false, but you know what? Even if we don't quite yet believe them, they still serve their function of interrupting the negative spiral of thoughts. Other tips that Dr. Margaret Warenberg offers include distracting yourself and redirecting your attention with an activity, journaling to get your thoughts out of your head and onto paper, or seeking help, talking out your thoughts with a therapist who can help you access more healthy processes. For the last 4 weeks, I've been taking Jennifer Shannon's mindfulness class as part of our winter spirituality series. Meditation and mindfulness offer us some amazing tools and inspiration for taming our thoughts. The key seems to be to not get too tied up in the guilt that comes when we realize we have drifted away from meditating and followed a thought. In class, Jennifer's gentle voice reminded us over and over, if your mind has strayed into thinking, that's okay. Just come back to the breath. Instead of feeling bad about the thoughts that came up for us, she would tell us to notice them and then let them go. Don't label them good or bad. Just notice that you've had the thought and then let it go. There's a Buddhist teaching story that I have shared with you before, but it bears repeating. It goes like this. A senior monk and a junior monk were traveling together by foot. At one point they came to a river with a strong current. As the monks were preparing to cross the river, they saw a very young and beautiful woman also attempting to cross. Overwhelmed by the current, the young woman asked if they would help her. Without hesitating, the senior monk picked up the woman, balanced her over his shoulders, and forded the river, letting her down gently on the other bank. The junior monk looked on in shock, but said nothing. When all three were across, the monks continued on their journey, the younger one still mulling over what had happened. After several hours of silence, the senior monk finally said to his companion, "Is something the matter? You seem very upset." The junior monk replied, "As monks, we are not permitted to touch a woman. How could you carry that woman on your shoulders like that?" The senior monk replied, "I put down that woman a long time ago at the bank. You, however, seem to be carrying her still." So, the Buddha was onto something 2,600 years ago when he sat under that Bodhi tree, right? He internalized some ancient wisdom that is still relevant in helping us stressed out Westerners get a grip on our overactive monkey minds. He passed on stories and techniques to help his followers to let go, to stop clinging. And other religious traditions offer us some spiritual tools as well. I had a little fun with the title of this morning's worship service. I am calling it Rumi versus Rumination. Rumi was a 13th century Persian poet, Islamic scholar, and Sufi mystic. He wrote a poem I love called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Welcome each thought. Do not label them as good or bad. Just notice them and then let them go. Rumi also wrote the words to our opening hymn this morning. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. But I like even better the lines he wrote that were left out of the song. Come, even if you have broken your vow 1,000 times. Come, yet again, come. Welcome each thought. Do not label it as good or bad. Even if this is the 1,000th time this thought has visited you, notice it and then let it go. And here is my absolute favorite line from Rumi. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Welcome each thought. Do not label yourself as good or bad. Just notice your thoughts and then let them go. You know, I will confess to being a ruminator. I am much better than I used to be at the anxiety part. I've learned to interrupt the negative predictions I make using phrases like, I have everything I need to capably address that if it happens. I use it a lot. But I'm still working on the rehashing of mistakes part. There is an indentation on my pillow where my guilt sits at night to tap me on my shoulder and say, remember me? Remember that thing you said? Hi, I'm still here. But the thing is, I see the work I am doing on this as spiritual work. I know that as I strengthen my mindfulness muscles to be able to let go of my own thoughts of guilt or shame, I am simultaneously strengthening my muscles to be able to let go of grievances, judgments, and grudges. I am strengthening my muscles to become more present, less reactive, more open to what is before me. I am strengthening my muscles to feel a wider range of emotions and to tolerate the emotions of others. This is a work in progress. I am a work in progress, and so are you. And this is spiritual work that we are doing. It's a project of a lifetime. And because there is so much homework, we must choose how we are going to use our time. Let us strive to spend as little time as possible acting like cows and camels. chewing over the same thought over and over again, lying awake at night in guilt or anger. Whatever apologies or confessions we need to make in the daylight hours, let's say them. Whatever grievances we are holding on to, let's begin to release the power they have over us. Let's make room in our hearts for our next guest. Interrupting the cycle of rumination is not easy, and it takes practice. But it is not hopeless, even if this is a habit of a lifetime. There are tools that can help, psychological and spiritual tools. And there is a deep peace awaiting us on the other side of our thoughts. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Amen, and blessed be.